On July 16th, 1965, a massive alien spacecraft from the Zeta Reticuli star system landed at a Nevada test site north of Las Vegas. Following a plan set in motion by President Kennedy in 1962, the alien visitors, known as the Ebens, welcomed 12 astronaut trained military personnel aboard their craft for the 10-month journey to their home planet, Serpo, 39 light years away. It is the Alien Probe podcast. It is Sunday, April 23rd. And I'm Doug. This is Deb. That's Deb.
That's me.
I'm Doug. And we're going to be discussing Serpo. This is episode 2. We discussed we're getting to the preliminaries of the mission with the 12 astronauts, and they're actually Air Force officers. And what we're doing is we're doing the lead up to the actual mission and some of the background of it. There's, we don't know if this is true, if it's not true, but it's we're taking this from. There's a book called The Secret Journey to the Planet Serpo, and it's a pretty fascinating book. So I would urge, and there's also a website, and we'll be discussing that. But the survival of EBE-1, what we learned from him, and he was he was an Eben, and he was captured from one of the crash discs at Roswell. And in a subsequent associate with his planet, it opened up an entirely new era of our planet's history. It was first baby step for Earth on the stage of galactic affairs and initiated a lasting alliance between the United States and its civilization initiated, a civilization on a distant planet. This was our antidote for the threat of the Fourth Reich in Antarctica, and it came at a perfect time. Roswell transformed American technology, expanded our cosmic vision, and opened up the door to the space age.
The space age. The selection of the Los Alamos National Laboratory near Santa Fe, New Mexico, as the site to house the alien found alive at the Corona crash site seemed at first glance to be rather strange and inappropriate. At the time of the crash, in July of 1947, less than 2 years after atomic bombs had been dropped on Japan, 4 years after it was founded, the Los Alamos Laboratory was still a little bit primitive. Originally, the Los Alamos Ranch School, a private school for boys who wanted to live an outdoor life. I want to go to that school.
Yeah.
It was selected by J. Robert Oppenheimer, the director of the Manhattan Project, and approved by General Leslie Groves, and then was commandeered by the Army in November of 1942 for the express purpose of designing and developing the atomic bomb.
Yeah, we know where that went.
Yeah.
It seems the most important rationale for sending the sole alien survivor of the Roswell crash to Los Alamos in 47 must have been based on trying to learn whatever they could about the advanced technology incorporated into the alien craft and whatever other scientific information he could give them. The theoretical physicists at the lab would have been most capable of comprehending the information and possibly converting it to human technology. In a more perfect world, an unexpected visitor from another planet might have been sent to a top university where Earth academics would have attempted to learn about his home world, but only 2 years after a brutal, devastating war, and with the military expecting another one, advanced technology adaptable to weaponry was the main preoccupation of the U.S. government, and paranoia was superseded civilized curiosity. It's more important to make weapons out of this stuff than be
Human.
yeah,
to learn about their life.
Just to learn about it. Now, how do we kill people with this thing?
Yeah. The major concern in dealing with the aliens was first and foremost communication. I guess we had to learn their language a little bit.
Yeah.
And evidently it was believed that if the most brilliant scientists in the country couldn't learn to communicate with the ET, then nobody could. So academics can't do what the scientists could, right?
Yeah.
Furthermore, once the alien was in a secure location, other more appropriate language personnel could be brought in as needed to facilitate communication and interaction. And they, of course, would be thoroughly investigated and made to sign security oaths before they gained admission.
MJ-12, that's the Majestic 12. It's the 12 people authorized under the president who look into these crashes and extraterrestrial visits and things. And these are the guys that they even knew more than the president did. So they kind of, although they did report to the president, it was really not known as to how much the president actually knew about everything. But they decided to refer to the Roswell aliens as Ebens. This was simply an unimaginative derivation of EBE, standing for extraterrestrial biological entity. After being comfortably ensconced at Los Alamos, there's a word you don't generally see.
We don't use that a lot.
The alien who was given the designation of EBE-1 by MJ-12 willingly cooperated in attempting to overcome the communication barrier. But the language differences were huge and seemed insurmountable. And later on, I'm going to try to put up, I have an actual list of the Eben alphabet. It's about 350 symbols, and it's handwritten on this piece of paper, and it's really bizarre.
As shown in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Steven Spielberg's 1977 movie. God, that was a long time ago. The Eben language consisted of tonal variations and sounded almost musical. One contributor to the Serpo website described it as high-pitched singing. Some of the sounds were not even reproducible by the Americans. For the entire 5-year period that EB1 remained alive, he was only able to teach the Los Alamos scientists about 30% of his language. Anonymous reported, Anonymous. That's
Anonymous. Anonymous, what did you remember from the first episode 1? He's the guy that doesn't identify himself, that's providing all this information to the Serpo website. And, and hence, that's where I believe they got that. And then the book was developed after that.
So he said that complex sentences and numbers could not be recognized. So we just got words, letters, just the very, very basics of their language.
You remember Close Encounters? When's the last time you...
I was...
Years.
I was a child.
You're such a youngster. Yeah, it's at the end... Probably don't remember that. And I had to be reminded.
I remember the music, and I remember the mashed potatoes.
Well, at the end, when they found, I don't want to give it up to anybody.
I've been since 1977.
So I don't know if those of you who haven't seen it yet, and they're less than 12 years old, probably don't care anyway. Mm-hmm. At the end, they were loading these the 12 scientists from the same story as this book. So. Right. Reagan actually talked to Spielberg at a certain point and stated to Spielberg, and this was quoted by a witness to the conversation, and Reagan said to Spielberg after he watched the movie with him, I don't know if he watched it with him, where they were discussing it, and he said, "This is more real than you really know."
Oh, wow.
So, pretty crazy. EBE-1 identified a piece of equipment found intact on the alien craft as a communication device for sending and receiving messages from his home planet. And he showed the scientists how to use it, but they couldn't get it to work.
No communications with his planet were possible for 5 years until just prior to his death in the summer of 1952, when one of the scientists realized that the device had to be powered by the energy source on the alien craft. Well, that would make sense.
Yeah, they'll discuss that later. But the Eben had he had a handler. He had an officer. Mm-hmm. I don't know which branch of the service, and I don't know if they're going to discuss this later. But I know obviously a lot about the story. And they, they communicated pretty well between them. However, whatever method they used, but they, when they tried that, it worked. It was what was very surprising about. This is the fact that an Earthling who figured that out, not the alien. Evidently, EBE-1 just wasn't very smart. Anonymous tells us that he was a mechanic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he wasn't a brain surgeon. He was just, just a mechanic. So,
he was a mechanic.
So he didn't know how the engine ran, but he's a mechanic.
But he didn't know how the radio worked. That's kind of interesting.
It was a secret.
Yeah, I don't blame him for not being truly, forthcoming with all of his information
Yeah.
because we put him in a damn hole.
Put him in a, put him. I don't know what kind of accommodations we
It
gave him,
couldn't
but
have
not a
been
lot.
great.
It was a certain, probably. I hopefully it was. It sounds like his handler. They would let. He lived in a house with his handler, literally
But
on base, of course.
but you're never getting away.
Yeah.
You're
So
you're not going back to your old life of mechanicking things. And did you let him be a mechanic here? Because we could use
let him work
we
on
could
stuff.
use an EB here to fix things.
They wouldn't understand our outdated technology.
Oh, okay, fine.
I mean, if you drop someone from the future and drop them in here, our stuff is. I imagine they're familiar with their technology.
They couldn't reset the Wi-Fi for me every now and
They
then.
couldn't reset the Wi-Fi and can't figure out why it's not working. Why OBS Streamlabs won't show my camera.
Aw, your life is so difficult.
It's hard.
Well, once the connection was made, the alien commenced sending messages to his planet. And during the summer of 52, he sent 6 messages, all of which were successfully transmitted. He was able to roughly translate the messages into English for the benefit of the Los Alamos scientists. So they must have been in simple sentences, because
Yeah, they'll go into greater detail about what's going on with the communication. Eventually, we were able to talk to him. There was message number 1, notified the planet that he was still alive, that Eben was still alive.
I am captive.
Help. Come pick me up, please. Message 2 told of the crash and the fact that his crew were killed upon impact. The third message requested, come help me,
Help.
that a rescue craft be sent on Earth to pick him up at the prompting of the scientists. So we're saying that the scientist said, hey, make sure you tell him to come get you. I'm sure he wouldn't have thought of that himself, but hey, I don't know. He's just a mechanic.
And when we get them here, we're going to keep them.
The fourth message suggested that a formal meeting be arranged with Earth officials, who would, of course, be American. Of course. Message 5 said that the United States government had requested that an exchange program, which is what this whole thing is about.
There's a dog poking its face in here.
Hey, doggy.
And the 6th message gave the landing coordinates on Earth for any future visitation. Why this was attempted is puzzling, since EB1 really couldn't interpret our chronology or numbering system, and we already knew that these coordinates were probably not going to be understood by the Ebens anyway.
Yeah, they have a different frame of reference on just about everything, time and everything, and it'll be explained later what the deal is with. Actually, it was a 10-year journey to 10-month journey to get to the planet.
Right.
And it was supposed to be a 10-year stay, and it ended up being 13 years because they couldn't convert. We lost the ability, any ability. They watch us, your watch.
Didn't work.
Yeah, your watch eventually just stopped working,
Yeah.
or didn't work the same way, or whatever reason. And then, they by the time it was 13 years by the time they actually got back.
Wow.
But I'm explaining the story, but they did get back. But it's a great story. I mean, this is a great story, true or not. But
Yeah.
EB1 did not receive some replies to the messages, but they were replies that only he understood. So they're probably smarter than us. They probably figure out our language quicker than we can figure out theirs. His attempted translations were confusing. Apparently, his planet agreed to a return visit, but the date they specified was over 10 years away. Our people concluded that this must have been a mistake, but they were unable to obtain a clarification before EB1 died in the late summer of 52.
Oh. EB1 did intend to make that suggestion, but apparently there was no reply to that message. The proposal for an exchange program this early in the game was evidently purely in the interest of intelligence and not goodwill, since the apparent spy mission of the aliens and the discovery of human body parts on the spacecraft very likely caused us to view the Ebens as potential invaders, even though we already knew they were not human flesh eaters. Well, I'm sure they didn't grab us to eat us.
Well, the thing is that when they went into the craft, there were human body parts in there. So they were doing something.
But they don't think they were.
And I don't think they were getting humans from the morgue. You know what I'm saying? As we discussed before, over 100,000 people go missing every year. In the U.S., about 2.9% of those 100,000 people are never found.
Isn't that bizarre?
So in this day and age with this technology,
Mm-hmm.
I find that's a huge that's that's a lot of people,
Yeah.
that aren't using credit cards, aren't using their cell phones, and all of a sudden
Right.
I can't go around the block without having my wallet, my cell phone
I
with
know.
me. So um, yeah, it's pretty crazy. Nonetheless, the discovery probably created sufficient distrust for us to obtain inside information about the race that dropped onto our planet out of the skies. After all, they were caught stealthily gathering information about our military capability instead of landing at the United Nations in Manhattan and asking to be taken to our leader.
Take me to your
Take
leader.
me to your leader. They
Yeah.
don't know who is your leader. I mean, that's always the big joke. Who's your leader? Who's the leader of Earth? So they looked at, at a certain point in our
Right.
history, look at maybe Trump. This is your leader?
Oh,
Okay, we'll never,
we're out.
okay, maybe Putin. Maybe Putin?
Yeah.
And then we could go down. I don't want to leave anybody out, but, those are,
Well, there are a lot of leaders on Earth.
yeah, so which,
Yeah.
that's what we would have to, well, we're literally just kind of, we lead this part of her. All of us, we have territories. Oh, so
Yeah.
you're warlike. Yeah, you might say that.
Well, yeah, you might.
Yeah.
Especially in the 50s, that would have definitely.
Well, that's
Here's our recent history. We just
yeah, that's why we wanted technology to kill people
we
rather
just
than
bombed
study.
we just bombed some cities into oblivion.
Yeah,
So
it's what we do.
we're a peaceful people. We did it for their own good.
You got to be scratching their heads.
Their little
Who
gray,
are these
their little
people?
gray heads.
Yeah.
Well, they had the technology to reach our planet, and be assured we were going to do whatever it took to get our hands on that technology.
Oh yeah.
So if we were able to walk around on their planet and they were willing to let us visit, we're going to get there. The fact that the suggestion originally came from the military caretaker strongly implies that the proposal was based on a military consideration.
Yeah. After the death of EBE-1, the Los Alamos scientists continued to try to establish communications with the Eben's planet. They had a lexicon of the Eben's written language to work with, and let me see. I can actually. I think I can probably put. Let's see if I can put it up there. And there we display capture. Let me see. I guess not. Oh, wait a minute. Let's see. Let's see how this. See how my technology works. Let's do that.
Oh, they're symbols.
Yeah. So it's a symbols. There's about 350. I can't try counting them all.
So you could get your name tattooed on you in Eben.
Yeah, it's kind of like when people do Oriental writing.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's you could put Doug in Eben.
So yeah, so it's I could do that, put Doug or that kind of thing. But anyway, that's them, and it's hand scrawled on a piece of paper. It looks like that. I know you can't type it, I guess.
You need a very different font. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now how do you get rid of it?
So yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, how do we get rid of this now? Yeah. So anyway, we can get back to that. Okay, so this is gonna be a problem.
No.
This is, where are we at?
Down.
Oh, so anyway.
Down. Yeah. You're right there.
After the death of EB1, anyway, so they had provided a lexicon. Sorry, everybody. Sorry, provided a lexicon of the Eben written language to work from, provided by EBE1. According to the DIA, this is the Defense Intelligence DIA information. This is the Defense Intelligence information. Putting that up on the screen was pretty fumbly, wasn't it?
It was kind of interesting.
So anyway, something new we're trying here. So bear with us. DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency. This is something that Kennedy put together. And we're not going to drag ourselves down the rabbit hole of the Kennedy conspiracy, the assassination conspiracy. But however, the DIA was developed by Kennedy because he threatened to take the CIA wasn't very forthcoming about the information they had on things.
Yeah.
So He threatened to take the CIA apart piece by piece, and then he throws together the DIA. Could find out. I'll put my own intelligence agency together, and whether or not that attributed to his demise is uh, definitely a topic of conversation. The scientists sent several messages in 1953 that went unanswered. And then, after an intense 18-month effort to improve their syntax, they sent two messages in 1955 and finally received a reply.
We had begun an actual dialogue with an alien civilization across a vast ocean of space, far more significant than the accomplishments of Guglielmo Marconi and Alexander Graham Bell. If this event had not been so secret, it would have generated huge headlines in all the major newspapers of the world. Yeah, just a bit.
Guglielmo.
Guglielmo.
Googly. Marconi and Bell.
Googly Elmo.
Marconi and Bell.
It's Googly Elmo.
Googly-eyed Elmo. Anyway, so one can imagine the celebratory scene at the lab when the first alien message appeared on the communication device. I wonder how it got there. When it's like, you have mail. No, they have.
I mean, back then it probably would have been like a teletype machine.
Might have been a teletype. Yeah, it appeared on the communication. Well, they had their own communication device.
Oh, that's right.
They don't explain how the intricacies of the device. I'm just curious.
That would be interesting. Was that the first LED screen?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't the first. It was alien technology.
Oh, I mean, they had.
It's where we got it.
They had LED screens.
And then we had LED screens. Funny how that works. Now come the job of translation. Unaided, the scientists could only comprehend about 30% of the message. However, with the help of language specialists from both U.S. and foreign universities, they were able to translate most of the message.
Based on the probability that the Ebens are smarter than we are, we seem to think that we're stupid. The scientists then decided to send a reply in English.
In 52 we were. We're a little bit better now.
Now, so we're hoping the Ebens will find it easier to translate our language. So,
that's what I say.
Because that's what Americans do.
Yeah, but
we go to other countries and say, why on earth would you not understand our language?
Yeah, why would you speak this language? Because when
they then received,
English is so cool.
Well, everybody should speak it, right? They then received a reply in broken English about 4 months later. The aliens didn't understand the concept of verbs. So their message contained only nouns and adjectives.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's going to be tough to talk about coming here when you don't have a verb.
So it's like Russian. It's verb. No, that's not verbs. It's consonants.
Yeah.
Lots of consonants. It took several months for us to figure out the English reply. It became clear. We are a little. Yeah. Several months. That if we sent them some basic English lessons, so we could. Like we do.
You will learn English.
Okay, you just have to learn and that does make sense. So you just send them 4th grade English or whatever, or 2nd grade English. Now it's probably kindergarten. Anyway, it might be possible to carry on a productive dialogue much faster than if we had to continue to labor over the impossibly cryptic language with 350 symbols. This was done, and 6 months later, Los Alamos received another English. So did it take them 6 months to
learn English?
To learn English?
Well, it doesn't. It probably takes a while for the message to get there. And then they got to study it.
I think they're like 39 light years away or something crazy.
And they were catching on, but according to Anonymous, Ebens were confusing several different English words and because English is stupid, and still failed to complete a proper sentence. But it was an auspicious beginning. The Ebens now had the basics for English communication.
Spoken like a true German.
Well, think about it.
Americans are stupid.
Think about how crazy English is.
Certainly, if they had the ability to travel throughout the galaxy and interact with other civilizations, they could decipher the rules of the language.
Yeah.
That human 5th grade, I said 4th graders, it's probably younger than that, mastered routinely. Very sensibly, the Ebens then sent us a compendium, there's another word, of their alphabet with what they believed to be corresponding English letters. So they have 350.
Yeah.
They have 350 symbols. That's what we just put up on the
E's.
screen. Yeah,
So,
responding English letters.
so this was then turned over to university linguists working with the Los Alamos scientists, and our language specialist struggled with it and had a very difficult time. It took another 5 years. Okay, we took 5 years before we required a basic understanding of their language.
Well, they have 350 letters. How do you? And they didn't divide them up for us.
And the Ebens became somewhat haltingly able to communicate in English. Oh my God, this must have been so frustrating.
Yeah, well, it's that is
5 years. 5 years to learn their alphabet. Come on.
During the 5 year period, which constituted the final years of the Eisenhower administration, the scientists continued to seek to arrange a return visit of the Ebens to Earth. That's interesting. The time, the time frame, because they got
Yeah.
Eisenhower, but yet the DIA was put together by Kennedy.
Yeah, well.
Dur- that's bizarre. So the scientists continue to seek to arrange a return visit of
So
the
we're
Ebens to Earth.
so we want more of them to come down and take our people apart because,
Well, they're here. I think as it turns out later, we figure out that these ships that are landing, these aren't. Um, you can't go from universe to universe with these ships. They're not galactic. They can't. They're only sport models.
so they were built here.
Well, they came from a mothership,
Uh,
allegedly.
she birthed them out. And,
Yeah, she pumped them out, and then they're coming down here. And actually, they're sending. I think it comes out later also that the mothership never really left the orbit. It was here all these 5 years. The thing was
it
just
was
sitting
just
there.
up there.
Yeah, the message really wasn't going back to their planet. It actually was going.
Oh, so
But
whoever's on the mothership's the one going, okay, well, now we have to learn this fourth grade English
Yeah.
and try to talk to these
Yeah.
people.
And we'll get to the end. As I remember, there's something about it was always here. It might have been between the visits that it was here, but we'll march forward.
Well, the desire for another visit was mutual. It appeared that we both wanted to establish some sort of diplomatic relationship.
Well, we, especially the scientists, were no doubt motivated by high-minded sociological and scientific interests. Our government officials and the military intelligence people were suspicious of the aliens' intentions. Shocking as that might seem,
Suspicious
the
military.
military is suspicious, and we're concerned about the understanding that their advanced technology, particularly as applied to weaponry.
Well, yeah. We were probably still hopeful that a return visit would lead to an exchange program. It will be recalled that this was proposed by EB1 in his fifth message at our prompting. But if he did receive a reply agreeing to it, he wasn't able to translate it for us. But he would have received it in his own language.
Yes.
But he couldn't tell it to us because
Yeah, because
poor
we're
EB1.
yeah, I'm torn. I don't know. The aliens had the same goals. We can safely conclude that they were very much interested in our atomic bombs. They have intergalactic travel. I'm not sure how so advanced atomic bombs is compared to that. But if you got that, if you have interplanetary travel,
Yeah.
you've got something that's probably going to be more dangerous than an atomic bomb, is my guess. I don't know. As we later learned, while on their planet, they had not developed atomic energy, and although they didn't have the more powerful, they did have the more powerful particle beam weaponry, and had used it in war. So they've got particle beam weaponry, and they're like, well, we don't have atomic weapons. Like, what do you want?
Why would you want that? I mean, if you could
Like us, we also want that.
yeah, we want that. And we have this, but we want
We
that.
want all the weaponry.
Well, once you have it all, then there will be peace, right?
Yeah.
The,
yeah.
the Evans wanted to retrieve the bodies of their dead comrades, which involved some complications. While we did keep the remains of the bodies frozen at Los Alamos using some very advanced cryonic technology.
Yeah, Anonymous says we performed autopsies on 4 of the 5 dead Evans found at Corona. That was at the Corona crash site. There were 2, as you remember, there were
Yes.
2 Roswell crashes. One was in 47, and there was a second in 49. And they wanted 49, of course. The bodies had been taken apart by predators and drug around, and they were decomposed. So there wasn't a lot left to do autopsies on. Although
We tried.
yeah. So This is probably explained. The autopsy thing was probably explained to them, but not really a surprise that it didn't shock them at all.
In fact, they probably expected it, as we later learned on Serpo. The Ebens had a rather ghoulish biotechnology research operation of their own that went far beyond simple
Yeah, I
autopsies.
mean, we're going to learn more about this later, but they had a building where they were actually putting together. They would put together like half, and they had human hybrids. So I wonder where those came from. Anyway, so um,
So that's why they were had body parts in their
yeah,
ship. They
I
were just,
mean,
I need an arm. We need an arm and a leg. And
I just did an interview. I did the interview on Friday,
mhm.
and one of the things he was abducted, and one of the things they did is they took sperm samples
Oh,
from
okay.
him. Yeah, he actually had marks. They were very symmetrical, four marks around a certain area of his body,
Hmm.
and that they were extracting.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if he knew. I'll be interviewing him at a later time, but that's going to be a good one. This what he experienced, and he saw some of these around his. Woke up and these things were standing around his bed, and he called them grays. Well, grays is another type of ET. The Ebens are the typical 4.5 5 foot, big eyes, that kind of thing. So planning the return visit turned out to be much more complicated than we expected. We were unable to understand their date and time system, which was an ongoing problem all the way to the trip. And they could not comprehend ours, so we sent them all the details of our planetary rotation and revolution and how we mark dates and time and precisely where we were at the moment we sent the data. I don't know if that helped or not. Apparently it didn't help because we ended up being there 13 years instead of 10.
And the Ebens were never able to understand our system. Well, it is kind of weird. You got 24 hours and the clock.
Well,
That's
they live in a binary star system,
yeah.
so there's two suns in
Okay.
their area. So it's a completely different time reference. So I don't even know if they got into what their reference of time was. It would be a simple conversion. Well, right when they got there, they should have been, well,
This
this
is
is,
now.
yeah, they should, one of the first things we should have done was figured out that we need to convert our 1 hour, 24
Right.
hour day, week, month into what theirs immediately. That should have been the first thing they did
Yeah.
while we have timekeeping, pieces.
Well, finally, by 1960, we figured out their time system and were able to send them longitude and latitude coordinates that we thought they could understand. However, we could not be sure.
In 62, we developed a better arrangement. Um, they when then decided to send pictures showing the Earth landmarks, simple numbering system for time periods. They allowed us to select a date, and we chose April 24th,
Well, isn't
1964.
that funny?
Oh, that's interesting. That's
Yeah.
selecting a landing location proved to be even more complex.
The military planners wanted to make absolutely certain that security wouldn't be compromised and that the press or the public would not have a clue about what was going on.
Yeah, first they considered remote islands, but they realized unusual movements of naval vessels would arouse suspicion. They decided the site had to be controlled by the military to ensure, complete
Yeah.
secrecy. They settled on the southern end of the White Sands Missile Range near Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. It's a pretty desolate area.
Holloman was previously known as Alamogordo Army Airfield, a training site for the 8th Air Force bombardment crews during World War II. They also selected, of course, a fake location on the base itself to misdirect interest. These decisions were made and confirmed by the Ebens in March of 62. It took 10 years from the death of EB1, that's your dog scratching,
Yeah, dog
to
scratching.
arrive at this historic agreement.
The long range planning schedule is somewhat surprising since the Evens must have had a mothership already in orbit around Earth and consequently must have been able to send scout ships to the surface without delay. So this whole time, like we talked about, they had a
From
mothership the whole time, and it
just
took this long. Maybe they really, they're not in charge though. They're only the mothership.
Right.
You know,
So they're having to
they
communicate
had
with
to
the
take
planet.
we were sending it to the planet, but it's probably like, okay, we'll get it, and then we'll send it, and then you know how it is when you do a message and then the other person
Did
does
you
the message.
did you ever back in the days when you had to do phone calls by TDD? If a deaf person wanted to call my state office and had a question, they had to go through the system where they would call and type a message to an operator. Their operator would then convey the message to me. I would then answer that question. The operator would type a message to the person on the other end. That's probably how this was.
And then sometimes the it isn't typed exactly
Yeah, and it would take
correctly.
forever. Yeah. So I'm assuming that's how this was, just like in the 70s for me. So that tiny 6-man craft that crashed near Roswell did not travel to Earth by itself over 38 light years from Zeta Reticuli system, which we later determined to be their home constellation.
Yeah, if a mothership had remained in orbit around our planet after the Roswell crash, it had remained in orbit after. That's why it was not possible for the Evens to just send Mother Scout crafts to surface to arrange formal rendezvous directly.
Yeah,
Why couldn't they?
why didn't they send a rescue? You know? Oh, now we have helicopters
That
going over the
Chinook's
house.
back. That's got to be that Chinook helicopter. Remember, it flew over yesterday. I'm like,
Yeah,
holy crap,
that's
what's that? Um, MJ12 and the government must have wondered about that and must have asked the question over the communication device at an early stage of the interplanetary
I
dialogue. So you're just questioning them right off the bat. Why don't you just do this? Why don't you just do that? That's typical.
you just read mine.
Oh, okay.
So now it's your go back to yours. You're here.
This brings up the possibility that this indeed happen, that some negotiations may have ensued without the subsequent knowledge of the DIA, the agency that ultimately released the Serpo material in 2005.
This should come as no surprise since the DIA did not exist in 1953. The Defense Intelligence Agency was created by John F. Kennedy's Secretary of Defense, Robert McNamara, in October of 61.
Okay. Whatever happened between the Roswell crash in July 47 and the advent of the DIA in 61 could only have been known to them from information they were able to gather after the creation from top secret Army and Air Force intelligence sources operating under President Eisenhower.
It would be fair to conclude that these military intelligence agencies were not very happy about having to turn this information over to a brand new intelligence agency created by a new young Democratic president who planned to replace them by combining all their functions under a single umbrella operation.
Yeah, and like we said, I don't know if this had anything to do with his demise, but
Yeah.
you got to remember they were trying to take down the mob, they were trying to take down the CIA. I mean, it was almost a suicide mission, if you ask me.
Yeah.
You just are some things you don't mess around with. Right now, the CIA is still today more powerful than the president.
Yeah.
So it's probably why we still don't know anything about any of this stuff. Consequently, they are probably not very cooperative and may have provided incomplete information or possibly even disinformation about the era when Eisenhower was president.
Most likely, they convinced MI12 itself not to share that intelligence with the DIA in the interest of compartmentalization. Well, it's good to know that that's not
Yeah.
a new fact that this has been going on.
Yeah, it's MJ12. It looks like an eye, but it's a J.
Oh, MJ12.
Majestic.
Sorry.
Just remember, it's Majestic 12. You're thinking MI, like MI6.
Yeah, that's me.
You're in England. I know you're going for the England. I know
Yeah, that's
like
exactly
James
what,
Bond.
That's exactly what happened.
Going for the James Bond connection.
Yes,
the heck
exactly.
These Americans are boring. This is probably exactly what happened, since we know that the Ebens did send another scout craft to Earth on May 20th, 1953, and that the craft did not crash. It landed. Evidently, those messages that were sent in early 53 must have been answered after all, but the DIA was not informed about when the agency joined the project, informed about this when the agency joined the project in 62. Just as the Roswell story, the revelation that the that an alien craft was thought to have crashed near Kingman, Arizona in 53 was kept tightly contained for almost 20 years. And this is about the Kingman incident.
If it hadn't been for the very thorough reporting of a dedicated National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomenon investigator, it probably would have remained buried for at least another 10 years.
Yeah, the dogged and
Isn't that what
indomitable.
Maggie was part of? Didn't she volunteer for them at some
For
point in time?
NICAP? I
Yeah.
have to ask her about this. You
I
have
think
to
she did.
revisit this.
Yeah, I think she did.
She was part of NICAP?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, and I've known her for this long, and I
Yeah, you
haven't
guys discussed it.
briefly, but I didn't really realize how
Well, you'll have to do
I
that.
have to do better investigation. The dog and indomitable digging. Indomitable is another one. There's some interesting words. Digging of the NICAP UFO teams in the 50s and 60s and their rigid screening and reporting protocols have become legendary.
Time and again, their facts were proven incontrovertible. Yeah. And their reports were unassailable. And it was this professionalism that most impressed the newspapers and convinced them to give the UFO story some mainstream coverage in the 60s.
As a result of the publicity, the government was embarrassed into forming its own formal public UFO investigative organization in 1966. The now famous Condom Committee.
Condon not.
That's what it always seems to me every time I see this, the Condom Committee by Gary Condon, which relied heavily on the fieldwork and reports of NICAP.
Author and veteran NICAP investigator Raymond Fowler first broke the Kingman story in an article in UFO Magazine in 1976. Is there still a UFO magazine?
I don't know, but Brent brought one to us.
Oh, cool.
Friday, old,
Yeah.
which he actually had found him and his dad were camping and something exploded and he found a piece of a UFO, they think. They were actually able to give it to a university to be analyzed. And it turned out to be some exotic material. It's interesting.
That's so cool. Well, this article was then incorporated into his book, Casebook of a UFO Investigator, a personal memoir published in March of 1981. J. Allen Hynek, we know that name, the chief scientific consultant for the Air Force Project Blue Book, said about Fowler, an outstanding UFO investigator. I know of no one who is more dedicated, trustworthy, or persevering. Fowler's meticulous and detailed investigations far exceed the investigations of Blue Book. Wow.
And you can find that at www.crowdedskies.com/ray_Fowler_bio.htm. I'm sure everybody's going to be writing that down.
There you go.
In this article and in his book, Fowler reports that in the course of his NICAP investigations in 1973, so she might have been involved in NICAP.
I'm pretty sure she said
NICAP got dissolved. It's around no more.
You guys talked about it.
But I didn't realize. I need to talk some more about her. He interviewed someone regarding a crashed disc found in Arizona. The interviewee chose to remain anonymous in Fowler's report, but agreed to go by the assumed name Fritz Warner.
Fritz Warner. Always thorough in obtaining evidence, Fowler asked Werner for a signed statement giving all the details of his experience, which he agreed to do. In that statement, which was on June 7th, 1973, Werner testified that on May 21, 1953, he assisted in the investigation of a crashed unknown object in the vicinity of Kingman, Arizona.
Think he's German?
It sounds like it. In the statement, Werner described the object as oval and about 30 feet in diameter. He said it was constructed of an unfamiliar metal which resembled brushed aluminum. That sounds pretty.
Interesting. He said further that the disc was undamaged and had penetrated only about 20 inches into the sand. And it's kind of would suggest that it came down at a very moderate speed.
Kind of floated down.
Yeah, implying that perhaps this really wasn't a crash at all, but more of if they landed, they didn't land very well. They nosed into the sand.
They parked like I do. The hatch was about 3.5 feet high and it was open, which was another indication of an orderly landing and egress. Yeah, that's exit would be better. The hatch height suggested that the occupants of the craft were about that tall. So I could be
Yeah.
Eben.
Yeah, exactly. As part of his statement, Warner claimed that he saw a dead alien in a tent near the craft. In his own words, as reported by Fowler, he said, an armed military policeman guarded a tent pitched nearby. I managed to glance inside at one point and saw the dead body of a 4-foot human-like creature in a silver metallic-looking suit. Dressed pretty snappy.
I mean, he had a little metallic
Little
suit.
metallic suit.
The skin on its face was dark brown. His testimony becomes slightly questionable at this point because in his description he stated with confidence that this alien had been the only occupant.
Yeah, since he was not permitted to enter the craft, there was no way
Yeah.
he could have known by observation how many occupants had been inside.
Consequently, somebody in authority must have told him that. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
This slip opens the entire statement up to the possibility of disinformation. Suggests that he was deliberately allowed to notice the dead alien and then was told that it was the only occupant.
Yeah, it could be disinformation. It's interesting that you can unravel. There could go many different directions. Werner told Fowler that he was one of about 15 engineers and scientists brought to the crash site in a bus with blackened windows from Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport on the night of May 21st, 1953. And he had been working on loan from the Atomic Energy Commission at the Nevada test site to assess the damage to various structures due to atomic test blasts.
Yes, I bet they were damaged.
I guess if he was German, he probably wouldn't call himself Fritz, right? Is that a derogatory? That's what we would. I guess that was our derogatory name in World War II.
Oh, really?
For German, one of the things we called them,
Oh,
as I remember. So he probably is. He's probably quite the opposite.
Exactly.
You know.
Well, he was flown into Sky Harbor from the Indian Springs, Nevada Air Force Base. And at the site, he was given his particular expertise. He was expected to estimate the velocity of the disk and impact from the way it was embedded in the soil. He ultimately concluded it had been traveling at about 100 knots. Let me shut that up.
What do with that dog out there?
Yeah, I'll deal with that dog.
That could almost be considered a landing speed for an anti-gravity craft. Fowler knew Werner's real name. We know now it's Arthur G. Stansel. We know the real name now.
We got his name?
Yeah, we know his name now. It's Arthur G. Stansel.
Oh.
And did check him out meticulously. There you go, right there.
He found that in 1953, Stansel was indeed a project engineer with the Air Force under contract to the Atomic Energy Commission. He had previously worked at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in the Foreign Technology Division.
Yeah, foreign meaning UFOs, I think. I'm sure it was, or Nazi, German, whatever. They were developing some pretty exotic aircraft and things toward the end of the war. They might have won if this thing could happen.
Yeah.
How'd you quiet the dog down? Did you put a muzzle on you?
I brought him in here with me.
Oh, yeah, your emotional support dog.
That's my boy.
He determined that Stansel's history and his credentials were genuine, that he had no reason to try to penetrate a hoax.
Perpetrate.
Okay, that too.
We don't penetrate
We don't
hoaxes.
penetrate a hoax. How do you know the word's penetrating? We're just drifting here. Each of the people on the bus was escorted one at a time by military policemen from the bus to the heavily guarded, brightly illuminated site.
Bright.
And instructed to just focus on his or her specific job, and they were told not to engage in any fraternization or discussion about what they learned. Well, that just doesn't sound
I
any
like
fun
they're
at
not
all.
like in a chat.
Yeah.
No discussing of this among yourselves. It's
Don't
like
talk about it.
like when you're on jury duty. No discussing the case.
Nobody ever does.
No. So really, Werner was violating the instructions when he peered inside the tent. Well, it's shocking. Given the rigid security measures governing the entire procedure, it's pretty much unlikely that the MPs failed to prevent him from looking into the tent.
Yeah, it really sounds like it was somehow a disinformation thing. I don't know really why, but
like you're going to sneak in there. Oh,
Yeah.
we don't see you.
Well, yeah, and that's one of the things in Roswell where people said that they got in and saw where they had put the craft back. They didn't put it back together, but they, how they do an investigation for crashed aircraft.
Yeah.
They put it in the hangar where it should go, even though it's blown up.
Right.
So, somebody saw that, and then somebody else saw that they were guarding the ETs in the truck in the deuce and a half, and they looked at each other, and as soon as the guard turned his back, they picked up the blanket.
Yeah, right.
You
Because
know,
guards
so
don't turn their back.
yeah, it never happens. More likely, he was allowed to see the alien and to go away believing that he had stolen a furtive glance, and was then led to believe that he had seen the only occupant, and that occupant was dead. Maybe it's the fact that we didn't want the public to know there's more than one. I
Right.
don't know. I don't know if that's
Well,
what they're
if
getting
you
at.
see one dead one, then you're not going to be as afraid of, well, one's dead and the other two
It,
ran away, or
it,
the other two are alive,
yeah,
or, one dead one would say, okay, there was a concern, but now everybody rest easy. Your government's
yeah,
in
everything's fine.
charge. The government has fixed everything. In fact, it seems unlikely that the stage scene was only for Werner's benefit. Probably all 15 investigators had the exact same opportunity. And when it came to secrecy vows, all the participants received very lightweight treatment. Air Force Colonel got on the bus and had them all sign the Official Secrets Act.
Yeah, he then asked them to raise their right hand, take an oath
Oh,
to never reveal
I promise to
what
never talk
they
about this.
experienced. And this was very different from the horror stories others have talked about, where terrifying intimidation and threats were common. And I think that happened before, where although those are the stories, I don't know if those were as prevalent as people as people might think, but I think it did happen
Mm-hmm.
where they were intimidated. That I'm going to drag you in the middle of the desert and bury you
Well,
if you
yeah,
say
it's
anything.
they can make you disappear.
Yeah, so I mean, they were. I mean, that's what made people scared. And back in the day, people were more scared of the government than they are today. If
Yeah,
someone government came in here and said, "Quit doing this, or we're going to take you out in the middle of the desert and bury you," I would be mildly concerned, but I wouldn't be as concerned back in the as I would
yeah,
have been in the
we're a little
50s.
more traceable these
You
days.
know,
It seems likely that the Air Force expected and wanted these people to later reveal the event and what they had seen in the tent, so that the sold dead occupant version would gain currency. We will see why this tricky bit of manipulation might have been carried out and why it was so important.
yeah, weird. The website that hosted the original Project Serpo revelation, it's done. You guys out there might want to make a note of this. A lot of this information, there's a lot more information about this going on this website. There's different categories, different. There's interviews by Rick Doty, about what he's knows about this, and he's commented to that. So definitely check out www.serpo.org. And there hasn't been anything put in. This is where people can simply put, their own story. I'm sure I don't know who runs the site, you know, but people can just put in information there that they've known. A lot of these people are dead now.
Yeah.
I mean, it stopped in I think the last entry was 2014. But there's other people in there commenting. I've kind of perused the site. It's hard. You can't hardly get through the whole thing, but it's but anyway, it invites military intelligence and other government insiders who had direct knowledge about what was the word, about the uh, about the Serpo story, to send in what they know or had experience for publication on the website. This is something that they just did, the senatorial UFO, UAP, the Arrow, the new organization Arrow, who's investigating all the UFOs and UAPs.
Mm-hmm.
And they had the guy that runs that they were interviewing him. They had a couple of senators, I think, interviewing them. Sorry if senators or Congress, if senatorials, I'm assuming it's a senator.
Yeah.
Um, and they were this thing's been going on. I don't know if it's been a year. It's been a long time. Not a long time in government terms.
No.
But the thing is, one of the questions they asked was that if they have gotten a website together so that people can come on and simply make a report
Right.
about what they've seen. And the guy's like, no, we haven't gotten that yet. It's like, dude, I could do this in 10 minutes.
Right.
And you can't, I think he's indicating they need some kind of, it's an approval. They've done it and it's going through an approval process, and it's getting, I don't want to say stonewalled, but it's getting, there's, for some reason, they're dragging down
Yeah.
the, the information on it. But one such contribution published on the site in August 2006, it sheds new light on what actually happened at Kingman. It's photographic image of two-page classified memo, evidently written as a briefing document for another government group. It's dated March 24th, 1995, and whoever sent it in evidently understood or perhaps suspected that there was a connection between the Kingman event and Project Serpo. It was sent by a researcher who supplied his name but remained unidentified. Supplied his name but remained unidentified. How do you remain?
In the posting. Well, he supplied his name to somebody, but they didn't reveal it in the posting. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
In the typed copy, the document makes reference to a vessel that fell in Arizona. Written in longhand, at the top it says 1953, Kingman Serbat Mountains, north of the Kingman Army Air Base. The Army Air Base is now the Kingman Municipal Airport.
Yeah, the Kermit Mountains are about 10 miles northwest of the airport. The document gives fascinating insider details about the Kingman crash retrieval as part of the explanation of how the long-term relationship with the Ebens developed and how the reverse engineering program began. That's interesting.
Oh, to begin with, sorry, there's a dog in my lap. To begin with, it is a confirmation of Stansel's report that an alien craft came down near Kingman in 1953. The major departure from his report concerns the number of occupants and their condition.
Yeah, the document says there were 4 all alive, claiming the vessel contained the 4 entities. 2 were disabled and 2 were reasonably well, but somewhat confused.
The writer of this document claims to know that another alien craft was actively monitoring the craft retrieval, although our people were not aware of that at the time.
Yeah, it didn't for whatever reason. It's interesting because the military got there before their rescue. I want to say rescue. Mm-hmm. Whatever craft was there, another craft out of the mothership probably. Mm-hmm. Before we got there before them, it leads me to believe that we've got crash retrieval teams on alert at all times, 24/7.
Yeah.
That we're ready. Whenever this happens, we immediately can get there. And I don't know if it's immediately to get there before the rescue team can get there, but it's immediately before you or I would be able to get out there.
Before the press gets a chance to.
And get my camera phone out there. Of course, that's in the 50s, they didn't have that. But, it was a little more difficult to get pictures. It's more difficult to carry your camera.
Yeah.
He says, little did the government know that the retrieval operations were monitored by the visitors. The visitors were well aware of the mishap of one of their vessels. However, the military got to the crash site first. And that's what we're calling them now. They're visitors at this point.
The choice of the word mishap is very interesting in this context. It infers that the problem was not so much that the craft crashed, but that the landing place was not the intended location. It implies that the craft missed its destination.
Yeah, considering the retrieved disc was ultimately taken to the Nevada test site, it's reasonable to conclude that it was originally heading for that location, only about 200 yards away on a northwest flight path. And we're going to go ahead and wrap it for this.
Are you done?
Episode of, Project Serpo. So, it's a fascinating story, but is it true? I don't, what I mean?
It is a great story.
There's a lot going on. This will be the format that we continue on. We won't go. We don't know. We'll do the. I mean, we're not going to wait months to do each one, but we are going to do different segments. Again, you can pick up the book Secret Journey to Planet Serpo. It's on Amazon. I don't want to, use quotations out the book without, pimping the book.
Sell the book?
Yep, I want to sell it. I want, make sure you you check it out. Thanks for listening to the latest episode of the Alien Probe Podcast. We welcome comments, questions, or requests to alienprobepodcast@gmail.com. Visit us on Facebook. Check us out at alienprobe.net. Twitter and Instagram at alienprobepod. YouTube, like and subscribe. Alien Probe Podcast. And if you plug in Doug Anthony after that, I'll bring it right to the top. Thanks to Deb for joining me today.
Thank you.
Another fabulous episode. And thanks to Max for hanging out. And
interrupting as often as he could.
Watch the skies.